This is the Ophthalmology Business Podcast, where we help you develop your ideal practice with help of other doctors and experts. The topics we cover include marketing, management, leadership, recruitment, HR, mindsets, and more. I am Narain Arulraja, the founder and one of the co-hosts of this podcast. Every listener of this podcast is welcome to join the Ophthalmology Business Academy, www.obacademy.org. The membership is on us, and it's our gift to you. Today, I'm excited to talk to Dr. Nimesh Patel, Assistant Professor of Ophthalmology at the Harvard Medical School. Let's jump in. Before we get started, Dr. Nimesh, why don't you take a minute to tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you? How did you get into ophthalmology? Tell us your story.
Well, thank you for having me today. Yes, you introduced well. I'm a retinal surgeon at Mass Sinai and Boston Children's Hospital, working at Harvard Medical School. I did my training at University of Miami Bascom Palmer for residency and fellowship. I've got into ophthalmology just because I really liked seeing patients getting better with their vision and realizing they were very happy because of this. And so that really started me on my journey. And I went into retinal surgery because I liked operating all over the eye and being as comprehensive as possible in an already subspecialized field. In terms of what we're talking about today on social media, I got involved in that a little bit more serendipitously, where one of our co-residents wanted to start an Instagram page for our residency program and asked me to help since I had some experience working with our marketing team. So that's how I got involved within social media to begin with, and that's led to a few other avenues. And now I teach a course at the American Academy of Ophthalmology on online content for including social media for ophthalmology.
Absolutely. As you know, I have a marketing background. I run a marketing agency called Equa Marketing, ekwa.com, and we work with ophthalmologists. Before we jump into the meat of this podcast, tell us a little bit about what is your personal experience with social media? In other words, what are you doing? Like, what platforms do you use? How do you use it? So that we kind of get a full picture on, our topic today. Our topic today is social media strategy for ophthalmologists.
Yeah, so it first started with this institutional account where we wanted to highlight the residency program and also bring in some more interesting cases for education to our institution. Then, as that grew quite rapidly, I started making my own accounts, both on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram in a small way, sharing only my own cases as well. And I found it very engaging to be able to discuss with other doctors, optometrists as well, medical students, all on this platform where these cases otherwise wouldn't really be shared. They're not meeting quality for, let's say, a case report or a publication, but they're all very interesting. So I started using it as a method to share cases. And then more than that, I realized it does help you in terms of practice building as well. I've had doctors refer me cases on Instagram. And then send patients in. And then also, I think it really does help building your brand in terms of sharing your research articles as well. So that's where I've also branched out to LinkedIn and Twitter. Because of this, I've also been asked to be on the editorial board of the American Journal of Ophthalmology, where I serve as an editor for a section we started called Illustration and Insights. And I also run the American Journal of Ophthalmology podcast, as well as their social media sites as well.
That's great. So it's almost like it was just it started out as a simple way for you to share your knowledge and your experience. And then it turned into opportunities for you. You got invited to do other things. You got cases, it built your profile. So I think you have the right spirit for social media. Like, social media is great if you enjoy those things, right? Like, in other words, if you are just doing it so that you get new patients and you don't even want to do it, you let somebody else do it, like your team does it, it really doesn't work, right? You have to kind of like it. You have to like sharing. You have to like spending time on it. Am I correct, or am I on the right path?
Yeah, I think both ways a little bit. So I think it depends exactly what you're looking for. If you're really trying to share cases, build a brand, share research, you really do have to be somewhat engaged yourself. But with that said, I think it's still important to have as part of your practice, even if you're going to have someone else running it for you. So I think it still drives patient referrals, sharing patient stories, as long as you're doing it confidentially. It still kind of helps build a brand. Other patients are online as well, and they see what you're posting. So I think you're better off being on it in some capacity, even if you're not really going full on and you're having someone else manage it for you, rather than not being on at all.
Yeah, I agree. Like when the doctor is totally disengaged, I think at least my experience is it doesn't work. But when the doctor is engaged, it does work. The questions, I know there's we call social media, we just say social media, but it's not one company, it's multiple companies. You have TikTok, which is the up and comer, right? Like everyone is now moving to TikTok. You have Instagram, you have Facebook, and you have Twitter. And Twitter, of course, Elon Musk, all that stuff that's going on. So like, how would you, like, what is your number one, at least for now and into the future? In other words, where do you think you for your goals that you outline, you would focus most, and what's number two, number three, and what's your thinking on it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we actually did a research project on this a little bit, and we found with our research study that Instagram is the number one platform at this current time. I think there's a lot, especially of optometrists on Instagram. So sometimes we, as doctors and MDs, we're not really thinking about them as a community, and they're much bigger than us, and they have a lot of engagement online. So it's really important to be there because that's where a lot of eye health professionals are on. It really depends on what your goals are. I think Twitter is more of a news feed, maybe sharing articles. LinkedIn is more for collaborating with industry. So a lot of industry professionals, if you're going to do consulting, they seem to be on LinkedIn. Also, I think LinkedIn tends to draw a slightly older crowd. So maybe your hospital administrators or your leadership tend to be on LinkedIn. So if your goal is to engage with them, that's a good place to be as well. YouTube tends to bring in more of those inclined to watch surgical videos or other things like that. I think TikTok has a completely different demographic as well, probably a little bit younger. I personally am not on TikTok, so I don't have much experience with that. I would say this in terms of if you're trying to figure out what to get on, unfortunately, you're probably better off doing a little bit on everything. I think it's hard to predict, as you said, with Elon Musk and Twitter, and even Facebook has changed a little bit, and there may be TikTok rising and the metaverse coming as well. It's really hard to predict how things are going to change. And you don't really want to put all your eggs in one basket and have that platform decline in popularity. So I would, if I had to pick one to start with, I'd probably say Instagram and maybe Twitter and LinkedIn to start the first few. But then you probably have to do a little bit on all platforms to try to protect against one platform going down.
Right. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, but Mark Zuckerberg doesn't even like the name Facebook anymore. He calls himself Meta, right? And he's spending $10 billion building this Meta, whatever, virtual reality world. And my understanding is they are having challenges because they get data from Apple and Apple cut it off. So they have no idea what's going on the Apple platform, where most of their users are coming from, both for Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook. So their revenue is down, their stock is down 75%. So you're right, it's changing so much. Like, and the world is changing, and of course, it depends on the guys running the company and all these other players who are influencing. It's a crazy world. I think
nothing lasts forever.
Nothing lasts forever. And then TikTok is the up and coming, like everyone wants to date TikTok. That's like, at least that's what it seems like, it's kind of interesting. So yeah, I think you're right. And you used the word engagement a few times in the conversation. So you're saying it's not really about just the content you post. It's also about replying to people, talking to people, is that correct? Like do you spend a lot of time like cultivating relationships, let's say on LinkedIn or all these platforms?
I try to not spend too much time. I think, you have to live your life and you don't want to live it on the computer and on the screen. But I agree, it is important to engage a little bit. So, let's say if you have someone asking you a question online about the case you posted, it is nice to try to respond to them. Now, I'm not that popular. I only have a few thousand followers, but some of these people who have 100,000 followers, they're not going to be able to answer all the questions. So you have to do it as much as you can. I know a lot of doctors who are popular on Instagram will say, okay, I'm going to spend X amount of time, 30 minutes answering as many things as I can, and then I'm done. And I think that's a good way to engage, but not overindulge yourself in social media.
Right.
I think it is important to engage with those who are engaging with you as well. So if you have particularly, you have certain industry players or collaborators who are posting and tagging with you, it's nice to do the same with them as well. If they're commenting on your posts, it's nice to comment on their posts as well to show that you're interacting back with them. And that will, overall help you both, I think, going forward. I see that
Right.
quite commonly with ophthalmologists, especially who go to conferences and post on LinkedIn. Oftentimes they'll tag their other doctors they know, their friend group who have presented at the same meeting, maybe the moderators of the session, and vice versa. And then what happens is when industry gets involved, they look online and they say, okay, look, these doctors seem to be all over the place, and it really helps both parties in that way. So yeah, I think it's good to try to engage with other doctors, industry as well, but set a time limit and don't overdo it.
Right. Now, you said, unfortunately, we have to hedge our bets and not focus on one platform. But if I'm just starting out and I've known nothing about this, right? I'm like a newbie, like I've never done anything social media. Is it better to just stick with one, just get your hands dirty, figure it out, and then I'm just asking, like what would your advice be?
Yeah, I think it's not a bad idea to just start with one and see how it's going. It probably depends on your goals. If you have a practice and the
Right.
goal is to really build the practice, I think you really need to be on all the platforms. If it's more of an
Okay.
individual, I'd say maybe try starting with one. But
Got it.
if you really are trying to go for a business perspective, I think social media is a really important part of that, and it's probably worth hiring someone to manage it for you in conjunction with you. But it's probably not something you want to do on your own if your goal is practice management, unless you have a lot of time.
Right. I think we kind of covered it, but I'm just going to ask you anyways. Is there a most popular platform? And I think you said Instagram, at least right now at this moment. So I think you answered that question. So
yeah, it seems like Instagram is the most popular at this time.
Right.
And just one thing to add. So if you're considering getting involved or not getting involved, I think it's important to understand that this is a wave that's coming and hasn't really slowed down. So the engagement and the number of doctors and other health professionals on Instagram or other social media platforms has only increased. And
Right.
it seems that when I talk to medical students, almost every medical student that I know has their own professional account. So when those all students become professionals, it's just going to increase the number overall. Other journals as well are even asking for social media accounts when you submit an article. So it seems to be a wave that's not necessarily stopping. And it's one of those things that you might as well get on board earlier than try to catch up later.
Yeah. Now, we work with quite a few doctors. I think I mentioned I run an agency called Equa Marketing. And the number one way most of our clients get their patients is through SEO, meaning they rank for hundreds of search terms in their local area. So, let's say a 30-mile radius. And my experience with my clients, we have around 400 physicians we work with, many ophthalmologists all across the country. And these are all private practice owners, 1, 2 locations, kind of like small practices, not like conglomerates, not hospitals. My experience is if you love being in the limelight, sharing things, like other people, like all this social stuff, you do well on social media. But unfortunately, in my experience, it's like less than 1% of doctors, at least in my cohort of clients. Most doctors that I deal with, they just don't want to do anything with this. So they just want to do medicine and that's all they want to do. And they want somebody else to just magically make the phone ring, right? And the advantage, I think, they find with Google is it can be almost all done by somebody else. Like they have to do nothing almost, like less than 2 to 3% of time is their time and everything else is done by somebody else. And also many of them don't like being public. Like I know some people, like, of course, we all know Pimple Popper in dermatology, right? She has a video crew and she's like a exceptional version of somebody who's extremely good at social media. I mean, she gets cases, people fly in from different countries to see her because she's so famous. I mean, we all want the famous doctor treating us, right? So my experience is if they love being social and spending time on it and sharing and videos and all that stuff, it seems to work. But one of the challenges I find is that they get people from 10,000 miles away looking at their content. So it doesn't necessarily, like I have a client in, who lives like 60 miles from me, and he's very big on TikTok. So he has videos that have gotten 5 million views. But the problem is it doesn't monetize for him, because these people who are seeing his videos are not necessarily in his small town. They are from China, they are from India, all over the world, right? So some of the questions I've gotten is, why am I doing it? Is it worth it? Like even this particular individual. And then I know people who sell products, like dermatologists who have their own creams, so forth. So then, of course, having a following of, 1 million people or, 10 million people watching your content makes sense, because you're selling to a global market. So I guess my question is, if you are a local practice owner who's just doing things locally, social media, unfortunately, unlike Google, doesn't have this local boundary thing. It's global. Somebody in Hong Kong could watch it, somebody in India could watch it, somebody in Africa could watch it, right? If you're doing something locally, if that's all your focus, I just want to get patients walking into my door, is it still worth it? Or are there better methods?
I think that's a good point, and I think it depends on where exactly your locally is. So if you're in a small town and you're the only practice in town, then yes, I agree, it probably doesn't help you. And anybody with an eye problem will walk in the door either way. However, there are other towns where there's quite a lot of competition in bigger cities and things like that. So you want to be able to stand out as an expert in that area. So I think it depends really on exactly where you're practicing. But if you're a small, local, small town type of ophthalmologist, it's not really going to help you. I agree with that. But maybe in a big city with a competitive market, it can help you for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we do social media for all of our clients, but the way I explain it to them is it helps you brand you as an expert, right? Because you have all this content and stuff, but don't expect new patients to come to you because of that. In other words, it's almost like you have that, you won an award and you have it on your website, and people are like, he won that award, I need to go see him, New York Times Best Doctor of the Year award. I'm making it up, whatever the award is. So it's kind of like a branding tool. So it definitely, I think from that point, definitely helps you. But the problem is nobody goes to Instagram types in ophthalmologist in my town or even New York City, right? That's not the way their mind works. They are rather, the way Instagram works is it shows you things that you don't even ask for, just through the news feed, right? I mean, through the feed. So definitely your brand will build. So definitely, I think it's a great brand building tool for every single doctor. Like, you need to be present. So I'm not disagreeing that you shouldn't be present. You need to be present. You need to be doing stuff. But how much time do you put in versus how many new patients are going to get in? That's the question you have to answer. Am I kind of making sense? Or if you disagree, let me know. I mean, this is a conversation.
I agree. Yeah, I think there's definitely a diminishing terms over time in terms of patient referrals, but I think that will change a little bit. I've already had patients, especially because I do some pediatrics, and so their parents are generally younger than the general population. And they will say, I saw your Instagram page, I saw your this, and you're posting these complex cases and you're establishing yourself as an expert. So I did come and look for you in particular, and you link to your website. So yeah, I agree. Now it's probably a little bit not as useful in terms of driving patient referrals, but I wonder how that's going to change. And I remember I also talked about the optometrists are in the area. So it only takes, as an ophthalmologist, a couple of optometrists who you know and trust you and refer you patients to get quite a lot of patients. So sometimes after I posted a few cases, I think there's probably some algorithms that tend to show your posts to optometrists in the area. I had optometrists in the area message me and say, hey, can I send you patients? What's your direct referral? Is there a better way to get patients into you? I give them my phone number. And then now I have about 4 or 5 optometrists that send me what seems like all their retina patients. So I don't know about that. I think if you can engage with the right people on social media, not directly necessarily with your patients, I don't think the patient is going to find you, but maybe your referral doctors will find you. And similarly,
I think that's
on LinkedIn,
an excellent point.
Yeah, and also on LinkedIn. So I had a colleague who he said he signed up for LinkedIn Premium for 1 month, which allows you to message people that you're not connected with. Right. And he sent a message to all optometrists in his area and just said, hi, I'm a new retina doctor in the area. Please let me know if you have any questions or you'd like to send patients. I can get them in right away. Send him his contact info and email. And that way, he actually also got a lot of patients from that optometry groups. Not everyone will respond. I think maybe even 10 to 20% will respond. And maybe only 5 or 10% will ever send you a patient. But then if you build a good connection with even 1 or 2 referring doctors, it can actually lead to quite a lot of referrals, I think. So yeah, I think and maybe you're not directly getting the patients to see your profiles, but I think you can get quite a lot of referral doctors to send you patients that way.
I think that makes total sense. I think I totally can relate to that. I think because once they see you as an expert and you are part of their circle, so to speak, because they see your posts and they talk to you. I think so I know the old way is you pick up the phone and call or go knock on their door and say, hey, I'm the new doctor in town.
Yeah.
And, but now you do that through LinkedIn or you do that through Instagram. So I think that's brilliant.
Yes, correct. 100%. And I think from what I heard especially from some of these younger optometrists that I tend to connect better with, is that oftentimes they're just looking even for just a second opinion without necessarily sending the patient. And sometimes you have to do that too. Sometimes they'll send you a photo and say, is this something that you need to see, or does this look fine to you? And you just message them. But then when something doesn't look fine, they tend to send it to you. One of the complaints a lot of them had was that when I send patients to the doctor, I may not get a referral letter back, or I don't see the patient back, or it takes them 3 months to get in. So I think you can use social media to help connect to optometrists who may be able to send you patients, and then you can give them instant feedback on their patients and send it back. And get their patients' appointments much faster. And that's what they like.
100%. So I think it's that getting their patients in faster, even sending them a summary of what you did, so that way they know what's going on, so they're not like out in the cold. And like you said, giving them that quick answers, it might take you a minute or two, but it builds that trust, right? You don't need, like you said, 3,000 or even 100 optometrists. You just need 3 people to send you patients. So
yeah, sure.
Spending time with those 3 and making them feel like they're important to you, now they realize that, like, compared to all the other ophthalmologists that ignore them, these guys like treat my patients like it's VIP. They are VIP patients. I'm gonna send as many of my patients as possible. That's excellent. I know we didn't touch on it, but I'm going to ask you this. What do you think about Facebook groups? Because I know, like, for example, mommy groups, and depending on, your specialty, right? If you're pediatrics, etc. Like sometimes I know some doctors who are very famous in those groups and they get a ton of referrals. Talk about that. Do you have any experience with that, or maybe not?
Yeah, those are getting more popular. I don't have much experience with those, so I don't see that much. Another group forum that's becoming quite popular is large WhatsApp groups or Telegram groups. There's one called the American Retina Forum, where I don't even know, I don't want to guess how many doctors on there, but it's quite a lot. And there's people who post in there more often, and the leaders of that are considered more famous because of this. So yes, group networks of doctors are becoming more prominent as we're going forward. I don't have as much experience with the Facebook.
Perfect. Before we wrap up, I have one question for you. Are there any downfalls? Are there any pitfalls? Things that, that might kind of get you into trouble? Can you talk about that?
There are many downfalls and pitfalls, yes. So I think the first thing you got to ask yourself is, am I going to make profiles, or if you already have a profile, am I going to make a separate professional account as a personal account? Now, I think some doctors who have a lot to share from their personal life that's very engaging to their community. Some have a good backstory. Some have a very interesting life. Some are very good looking. They have things that other people want to see in their personal life. And for those people, it does somewhat make sense to use that to help engage with the patients in the community as well, and just have one account. For some of us, more like myself, who are really just posting cases, don't really have as much to share from their personal life, want to keep their personal life a little bit more private, share with just their friends, I would generally recommend having 2 accounts. And the reason is that you don't necessarily want your patients to see exactly what you're doing in your personal life all the time. And that's just one kind of advice I'd give, is that for the majority of the people, I would really recommend keeping it very split, the personal and professional accounts. The other reason I did that was because at first I was having a little bit of a mix, But I didn't really like when I wanted to go see what my friends were up to, seeing all these eyeball accounts. I wanted just to see what my friends were doing on the weekend. I didn't really want to look at ophthalmology. So it's actually kind of nice from my own standpoint, where if I want to engage with ophthalmologists, I can use my professional account. And if I really just want to, see my friends' kids, I can use my other account. So I think that's one thing, is it probably helps avoid some trouble as well in that respect. The other thing to really look out for is confidentiality. So I do see it not infrequently, where in the background of posts, there may be a medical record number, there may be a patient name. If you're posting full face photos, you need consent from the patient. You never want to post anything identifiable on these forums. So one way to avoid that is actually just not posting on the same day you see a patient. And that way, you can't say, well, this patient was here today, and someone could potentially trace that back a little bit easier. So yeah, I'd say really being really careful about patient confidentiality, not posting anything that has identifiable information, and trying not to post anything that has something from your personal life that could be construed as, negative in general. Just keeping in mind that anything you post online is forever. So it can be screenshotted, it can be downloaded, it can be used in later times. So yeah, I would generally say keep slightly separate accounts, and just be very careful of what you post, and try to get consent if there's anything identifiable, and really write it in there.
Makes sense. Any other final thoughts as we come to a close?
No, I think we really covered it all in general. I would just say overall, I think social media is something that's coming, and it's already here in a lot of ways, and it's probably better to be involved in some fashion. I think it can really help for a variety of doctors. It doesn't always have to be for practice building. A lot of times sharing research is a good way to do it. I think probably more people read my article when I post on LinkedIn than if I don't, and it's just hidden in the print journal. I think probably more people read online articles now than they ever did. So that's a good way to share research. It's also a good way to show that you're doing good work to your hospital administrators who tend to be online. And it probably does also help drive a lot of patient referrals, either directly or indirectly, for practices going forward. So I think it's generally a good thing to be involved in. Try to be careful. Don't post anything identifiable. And I think that's mainly the advice I'd give.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patel, for joining us today and talking to us about social media strategy for ophthalmologists. We appreciate it very, very much. I also want to take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. We cannot do what we do without you. If you like our podcast, kindly share it with your friends and on social media. Also, please don't forget to write a review on iTunes or Google Play. Your reviews will help other doctors and practice owners find us. Till we meet again, wishing you all an amazing week ahead.